posted for Friday? A few of you. How many of you read Minister's Black Veil? Most of you. How many of you read? We're on a roll, so, you know. How many of you happened to read Barn Burning for today? Okay, that's kind of what I expected. It was on the syllabus for today. It's also on the syllabus for, where did I put the syllabus? It's also on the syllabus for Wednesday. And that's also on the syllabus for Friday. We're not going to talk about it Friday. We're going to hopefully do all of Barn Burning on Wednesday. So, for those of you who didn't watch the videos that I posted on Friday, in the future, if something happens, please do. But I'm going to give a 1 hour version, no, take that back, 45, maybe 50-minute version of discussion for the Minister's Black Veil for today. Then for Wednesday, we'll do Barn Burning. Not sure how. It's more than twice as long as this short story, but there is a lot we can skip. So that what I'd like to be able to do is discuss Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find. Where is it? There it is. Which is about 11 pages on Friday, right? Barn Burning Wednesday, O'Connor Friday. That'll put us a day or two ahead, if that happens. Which, is, if everything else goes to schedule, will be very helpful for when we get to drama, because I only have 2 days assigned for Antigone, and it'll probably take longer than that. But we'll work things out. So, for today, we're going to discuss, in about 45, 50 minutes, Minister's Black Veil, okay? And you need to begin, I'm not going to say anything about Hawthorne's background, all that kind of stuff. That was on the lecture, the stuff on the video, you can watch that, it's in the book. You need to begin with his subtitle, a parable. What's a parable? I mean, literally, what is a parable?
A story with a lesson.
A story with a lesson. Okay? How do you know that? Put her on the spot. The Bible. Where do we see parables in the Bible? Jesus. Jesus is a famous parable teller. Yet, if you go back and look at the Gospels, which is where we hear Jesus speaking, and look at the parables that he tells, in most of the instances when Jesus tells parables, he kind of tells them to two groups. Big groups, you know, feeding of the 5,000, feeding of the 4,000, Sermon on the Mount, that kind of big groups of people. And then smaller groups, just the disciples. And in both instances, generally what happens, because it's not every time, but this happens more often than not. How well do, let's just call them the people, understand the parable? Almost never. How do you know?
Because then they ask questions.
Because in most instances, after he tells the story to everybody, Jesus goes aside with the disciples and they say, what did it mean? Explain. Like the parable of the sower. Guy sows seed. Some of it falls on rocky soil. Some of it, germinates, grows up, sun shines instead. Some of it grows on soil, and then there are weeds mixed in, and the weeds kill out the good seed, and then some of it falls on fertile ground, and it rises up. And they go, what the hell are you talking about, Jesus? I mean, we're not gardeners. They're fishermen, right? So they're, and he explains. In many of the instances where Jesus tells parables, that is the paradigm that is followed. He has to explain. So if a parable is a story to tell a lesson, but the people don't understand the lesson, how good of a story is it? Here's the kicker. When Jesus tells those stories, he often, not all the time, but sometimes, he often either prefaces the parable or ends the parable with a phrase. Let he who has ears to hear, hear, or let he who has eyes to see, see, meaning understand, perceive. What does that mean? Not everybody has the right ears. Not everybody has the right eyes. Some people's ears are ready to hear, to listen, to understand. Some people's eyes are ready to see, perceive. Okay? What's Jesus' point? And why does he take aside the disciples and explain it to them? Well, the disciples, I'm going to use a term that I hate to use, but I'm going to use it anyways, are in, an interpretive community. All right? That is, Jesus gives them the keys to understand. Why? What are they going to be tasked with doing when Jesus leaves? Spread the news. So they have to understand the news in order to spread it. Okay? Here's a modern example. Leave Jesus aside for, well, kind of. As an example of an interpretive community. Who's going to better understand the quote-unquote words of Jesus? A quote-unquote Bible-believing Christian, somebody who's raised their life in Christianity, reads the Bible, believes in it, etc., or Buddhist, who hasn't read the Bible, and, heard of Jesus, great moral teacher. Probably the former rather than the latter. Who's going to better understand Buddhism? A Tibetan monk who's practicing Buddhism, or a Bible-believing evangelical Christian who thinks that Tibetan monk's going to hell? Probably the Tibetan monk is going to better understand Buddhism, depending upon your majors. Okay? There are interpretive communities kind of around each and every one of you. I'm more than likely not part of that community. If you're a recording industry major, I am outside that community. Unless all you're talking about is stereos, speakers, CDs, record albums. Those I can understand. But when you start talking mixing equipment, whoosh. If you're a physics major, just whoosh. Mathematics, just leave. Just don't be in the same room with me. Just go away, kind of a thing. Okay? Not my community, so to speak. So, to understand a parable, you have to be in the community to understand the parable. A parable is not a story to make a point clear. It's only clear to those who get the point. All right? All that's kind of preface. So Hawthorne tells us, this is a parable, folks. In other words, some people aren't going to get it. Okay? And then he gives us a footnote. Never trust a footnote by Hawthorne. Because the footnote tells us, this kind of thing happened about 80 years previously. Now, Hawthorne writes this in 1836. 80 years previously would be 1756. All right? Not quite the heyday of Puritanism in New England, North America, but there's still some Puritan strains and such. The reason I said never to trust a footnote by Hawthorne, how many of you had to read the Scarlet Letter in high school? Probably a few of you. How does it begin? Remember? I know you probably tried to push that down like, bad juju kind of. It begins with a chapter called The Custom House, about him, Hawthorne, working there, and he discovers this manuscript. And the manuscript tells the story of the script. It's all BS. That's all part of the fiction. J.R.R. Tolkien does the same thing with The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings were actually manuscripts that somebody a long time ago found. In other words, Bilbo and Frodo are real. No, there are people who think they are. Just like there are people who think Jedis are real. No, Quidditch isn't real. Just stop. Okay? So, Whether or not that really happened, I don't know. So, what's the plot? The basic plot. Remember plot? Order of arrangement, order of incidents in a story. Which reminds me, by the way, if you haven't seen, there's a quiz due Wednesday night, 11:59. It's extra credit. But it gives you an idea of what quizzes will look like. And almost everything that's on that quiz will probably show up in another couple of quizzes, okay? If you don't take it, you don't get anything. If you take it and get 1 point, that's 1 point extra credit. Anyways, plot. The author's arrangement of incidents in a story. What's the basic plot of this story? How's it begin? For those of you who read it, don't be shy.
The people are getting ready for church and going over.
And what happens?
The pastor shows up with a veil over his face.
Parson Hooper, I have a white one. Parson Hooper shows up with a piece of white cloth over his face. What do the people immediately start to do? Okay? He goes into church. He preaches. He prays. He looks up to God and prays. The veil falls across his face. He prays. He gives a sermon and scares the heebie-jeebies out of most people. Some of the more weak women have to be, escorted out, shrinking violets and all that kind of stuff. Okay? What happens later on in the afternoon?
He gives a funeral service.
There's a funeral. He wears the black veil. And they're like, well, this is appropriate. I mean, you're in mourning. What happens later in the evening? I'm just doing the plot real briefly now. There's a wedding. No. You don't wear black veils. You don't wear black to weddings. Why not?
It's gonna be death.
Yeah, because black is the symbol of mourning in terms of clothing. You're going to see when we get to Hamlet. Hamlet is benighted, meaning he wears black. Why? Because he's mourning for his dead father. And people are like, oh, well, surely he won't. And he shows up. Come on, man. Gives bad, vibes to the wedding and stuff. And then, a bunch of time goes by and he dies. Still wearing the veil. From the morning he puts on the veil, he never takes it off. And apparently, 40 or 50 years. Okay? So, back up for a moment. So that first morning, people start, as I said, and all they, I don't like it. Doesn't look like Parson Hooper. Shut up. Anyways, so he goes in and he gives his sermon. Now, a couple of things. The word veil is going to be used many times through the story. It doesn't always have the same meaning. Sometimes it just means veil, like a piece of cloth covering the face. Sometimes it means other things. Context is important, all right? So, it's also called an emblem on page 332 in that first paragraph towards the end. So we're given a little background. What kind of preacher, and I mean literally when he preaches, what kind of preacher usually is Parson Hooper? Is he a fire and brimstone? It's going to literally scare the hell out of you? No. He's kind of, he doesn't push the envelope. He's kind of gentle, kind of maybe slightly boring, monotone. I don't know if you've ever had professors, they use one tone all throughout. You might as well just, okay? It's kind of him. What about this day? Does he do anything different? Does he change his intonation patterns? Does he wildly gesticulate and walk all around? Nope. Same behaviors, same manner of speaking, but we're told, as he preaches, and about the topic, has a different effect this time. What's the topic of his sermon? What's he preaching about? This is on page 332, big long paragraph, second half of the page, right in the middle. secret sin. What's secret sin?
Sins you're hiding from other people.
Sins you're hiding from other people. Not the kind of sins you blurt out, on the radio, TV, etc., podcast, Secret sin. We're told it was tinged, right in the middle of that paragraph, rather more darkly than usual with the gentle gloom of Mr. Hooper's temperament. Okay? And we've been told earlier his temperament is kind of melancholy, melancholic. What does it mean to be melancholy? Louder?
Depressive.
Kind of. You're, kind of depressed is the terminology we would use today. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It can also mean meditative. That is, you're wrapped up in your mind. You're distracted. You've got a lot going on. Okay? He walks around usually looking at the ground, thinking of just the problems of the world, so to speak. But this time, it's tinged. Notice, what does the word tinge mean? If you tinge something, what happens to it?
Color changes.
Its color changes. It actually becomes kind of darker. So you get a whole bunch of terms in this short story that refer to darkening or dark. Gloom and gloomy, shade, shadow, darkens, dismal. Dismal means darkened, okay? Rather more darkly than usual with the gentle gloom of his, temperament. He's kind of a gloomy Gus. Subject had reference to secret sin and those sad mysteries which we hide from our nearest and dearest and would fain conceal from our own consciousness, even forgetting that the omniscient God can detect them. So, to put yourself into the proper interpretive community of this story, you have to, one, presuppose or accept the existence of God. If you don't begin with that, you're not going to get it at all. So if you're walking, I'm a card-carrying atheist, there is no God, you're not going to get his point. Period. You might be able to enjoy the story simply as a story for the arrangement and all that kind of stuff. But you're not going to really feel it, so to speak, okay? So, notice the things he just said. Those sad mysteries we hide from our nearest and dearest, the things we would conceal from ourselves, and the things we try to hide from God. Which, if you accept kind of a standard definition of God, all-knowing, it's one. You can't hide anything from God, right? It's not like, you can't see this, God. I've hidden it from you. God's like, really? So, what's the effect? Each member of the congregation, from the most innocent, notice girl, not boy, not man, because men are pigs, not literally. And the man of hardened breast felt as if the preacher crept upon the behind his awful veil. Who's the his awful veil? Is that referring to Parson Hooper and his veil? Or is that referring to each person in the veil they've got around them? And discovered their hoarded iniquity of deed or thought. Like he comes up behind him and goes, boo. Got me. Notice it is a hoarded iniquity or thought. What do you do when you hoard something? You just take stuff. The worst hoarders in the world are not billionaires and millionaires. They're old people who lose their minds. Who think, my parents, who think because they grew up in the Depression, we're going to run out of stuff. So they save. My dad used to reuse. Last 5 years of his life, used to reuse Kleenex. He'd get a good soppy wet, and then he'd set it out to dry, and then use it again. We're like, Dad, you don't have to do that. stuff them up, these sleeves and everywhere, okay? I've known a lot of old people who've done that, and it's because they think, we're never gonna have Kleenex again. They stopped making them. No, they haven't. So, notice, it has this effect on everyone. The most innocent girl, a 6-year-old. Really? How much sin can a I shouldn't say that because of the 6-year-old kid who shot his teacher in Virginia. Okay, 6-year-old girl, because it was a boy. 6-year-old girl, innocent, pure, etc. And he comes up behind her. Gotcha. So, service finishes, and whereas people used to wait outside on the porch for the preacher to come out and wish him a good day and how are you doing, but now they can't wait to get away from him. Okay? Afternoon comes. It's the funeral. He goes, it's open casket. I don't know if you've ever been to an open coffin funeral, but it's an open coffin funeral. So the coffin's there, lid's up, body's lying there. He's got his veil on. So the veil's like this when he walks around. But when he bends over, notice he can look down. And if there's somebody down there, like a midget, the midget could look up and see his face. Obviously, I'm being facetious. He looks down at the corpse. Page 333, last paragraph, middle of it. As he stooped, the veil hung straight down from his forehead, so that if her eyelids had not been closed forever, the dead maiden might have seen his face. Could Mr. Hooper be fearful of her glance that he so hastily caught back the veil? That is, when the veil falls down, he immediately pulls it up. And what are we told happened? A person who watched the interview. Now we think interview means what? What do you think about this? Right? People asking questions. What does that word literally mean? The two components of it. Inter, between, view, seeing between. Person watched that and said that the instant when his features were disclosed, that is, when the veil opened up, the corpse slightly shuddered. The body did. Which corpses will do sometimes, if the burial is within a day or two of death, not after embalming. After embalming, nothing's going to move. Otherwise, there will be still little electrical contractions, passing of gas, things like that, and the body can sometimes move. Okay? Rustling the shroud and muslin cap, though the countenance retained the composure of death. Who saw this? A superstitious old woman. The fact that she is superstitious means what? Maybe it didn't really happen. Maybe she thought it happened. Okay? But she tells everybody. Okay? So, go down to the end of that paragraph. The people pray, and he prays that they and himself and all of mortal race might be ready, as he trusted this young maiden had been, might be ready for what? For the dreadful hour that should snatch the veil from their faces. What veil? See, that's not a literal veil. So what veil do we all have on our faces? That will be snatched at, quote, that dreadful hour. What's the dreadful hour? Death. Does death take an hour? Usually, heart stops, brain stops, dead. Okay? It's a metaphor. So what's the veil? The separation between living and dead. In one of the Harry Potter novels, book 5, I teach Harry Potter course, there's a room that Harry goes into, that's the room of death. And there's a veil in that room. And Harry is drawn to that veil. It's part of the whole theme of the overall novels. Harry's drawn to death. If you've ever figured it out, the entire Harry Potter series is about one thing: how to die well, how to die properly. Okay? Which means how to be prepared for death. Notice what he says here. As he trusted the young maiden had been, what? Ready for that fateful hour, dreadful hour, when the veil would be lifted. He trusts, was ready to die. Because what happens if you're not ready to die? Not a good result. Okay? So, what's the veil that must be lifted from our faces? The veil between time and eternity, outside of time. Okay? So they're all like, okay, that's a good prayer, that fits, etc. A few hours go by, and there's a wedding. And he comes wearing the veil. They're like, no. Not good. Long paragraph beginning page 334. Such was its immediate effect. He comes in wearing the veil, that a cloud seemed to have rolled duskily from beneath the black crape. So he enters the room, and it's like it suddenly gets dim in the room. Assume you're getting married. What do you want the venue, whatever it is, to be like?
Not dim.
Not dim, thank you. You don't want to walk in and it's... Why not? Go on. Darkness is symbolic of, nighttime is symbolic of death. Okay? You want it to be bright, sunny, light, filled with candlelight and flowers and music and all that kind of stuff. Okay? But he comes in, he's like Eeyore in the old, Disney Winnie the Pooh stuff, cloud and rain, it just spreads. And dim the light of the candles. See, Hawthorne was well read. He understood in English culture, okay? You got candles at the wedding. If the candle's dim, if a wind blows through a window and blows those candles out before the vows, that's a pretty good indication. Don't go through with the wedding. That's bad voodoo, man. That means the marriage isn't going to last, and or one of you is going to die. Okay? So candles go out, just call it off right there. But the bridal pair stand up in front of the minister. The bride's cold fingers quiver in the tremulous hand of the bridegroom. Why are her fingers cold? What should her fingers be? Why? Because she's alive. First of all, whose fingers are cold? Go back a few hours, the dead girl. Okay? Kind of standard. Why else should her hands be warm other than being alive? Thank you. What should her heart be doing at this moment other than beating? Palpitating. In other words, it should be beating faster. Why? There's excitement. She, hopefully, is looking forward to this moment. So the blood is really rushing. Okay? In his hand, he's got the jitters. Not a good sign. Again. And her death-like paleness caused a whisper. People thought that the maiden who'd been buried a few hours ago was back to get married. Just call it off. Death-like paleness. Men, assuming you get married, assuming you marry women, do you want your bride on the morning or the day of the wedding to be looking like a corpse? Probably not. Again, blood should be flowing. Her face should be glowing. Not like this paper. Okay? So what does he do? I mean, the wedding vows are exchanged. And he does what is customary at a wedding. You toast the happy couple. He holds up the glass of wine. And at that instant, catching a glimpse of his figure in the looking glass, that is, he sees his reflection in the goblet. And we're told, the black veil involved his own spirit in the horror with which it overwhelmed all others. His frame shuddered, his lips grew white, he spilt the untasted wine upon the carpet, and rushes out into the darkness. What does that mean? Catching a glimpse of his figure in the looking glass, the black veil involved his own spirit in the horror with which it overwhelmed all others. How does he see himself?
A big ball of sin.
Okay, that's figurative. How does he literally see himself? Notice, we're told in the looking glass. I can, if I don't do too much with it, I can, and I just did it, I can hold this up when the screen isn't lit up, and it acts like a mirror. Okay? So by doing this, I can see myself how?
Through your reflection.
How you see me. Okay? Without this, how can I see myself? Well, I can see this part of myself. I can't see this part, it doesn't work. Okay? But you see me. He experiences what? What they've been experiencing all day. See, he hasn't seen what he looks like with the veil. This is his first experience of that. And what does it do? It terrifies him. He rushes out. I think that's kind of euphemistic. He runs out into the darkness. Why into the darkness? Literally, because it's nighttime. Metaphorically, because he can't be seen. Even if he were to hold up the glass of wine, he wouldn't see himself. In other words, go back to the sermon on secret sin, trying to hide things. Okay? So, not one person, we're told, it was remarkable that of all the busybodies and impertinent people in the parish, not one ventured to put the question to Mr. Hooper. What's the question? Wherefore he did this thing. That is, why'd you put on the veil? Notice what we're told about the parish, by the way. It's full of what? What's meant by busybodies? What are you? Okay, thank you. What are you if someone calls you a busybody? That's not a compliment. That's not, gee, thanks. It means you're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. You're prying into others' business. And we're told the parish is full of these kind of people. By the way, that's a sin. It's a biggie. Okay? But one person does. But the implication is this person is not a busybody. Who's the person who does? Elizabeth. Who is? His fiancée. She comes the next morning, knocks on the door, and we're told, page 335, she is unappalled by the awe with which the black veil had impressed all beside herself. That is, it doesn't bother her. Liar, liar, pants on fire. How do we know?
She asked to take it off.
She asked him to take it off. Just once. Just once. Okay? And she comes in and she says aloud, as if to herself. Page 335. There's nothing terrible in this piece of crepe except that it hides a face which I'm always glad to look upon. In other words, seeing you, your face, makes me happy. Okay? Come, good sir, let the sun shine from behind the cloud. In other words, your face is the light of my life. Oh, sappy, syrupy, 70s rock, you know. Lay aside your black veil, then tell me why you put it on. Notice she doesn't say, lay aside your black veil, then tell me what it means. She says, tell me why you put it on. Two different things. His smile glimmers faintly. Notice the veil doesn't go down over his mouth. Even though when he first puts it on and he delivers a sermon, we're told as he speaks, the veil moves. Well, the only way it would move is if it's covering his mouth. So there's a problem. And he says, there is an hour to come, there's that language again, when all of us shall cast aside our veils. Same kind of thing he said about the dead girl. Take it not amiss, beloved friend. Really? She's his fiancée. Hopefully a little bit more than beloved friend. Take it not amiss, beloved friend, if I wear this piece of crepe till then. Okay, what's the till then? Till I die. Take it not amiss, that is, excuse me, if I wear this piece of cloth until I die. Okay, what have we said she is? Fiance, which assumes what? They're going to get married. Oh, this is, supposedly 1756 or thereabouts. What are they going to do on their wedding night that they haven't done yet? They're going to have sex. Because traditional Christian religion, until that marriage is consummated, have sex. It ain't a marriage. You could be married for 80 years if you've got the stamina and never have sex. And that marriage in the eyes of the church is not really marriage. Okay? He's saying, even on our wedding night, hon, you're not going to see my face. And maybe she, at that point, she'd be going, okay, because then I can imagine you're Brad Pitt or, whatever, or that 17th, 18th century equivalent, which I have no idea who that would be. So, when the hour comes that we will all cast aside our veil, is he talking about his individual death in that line? No. What's he talking about? Which is when? Keep going. Closer. Judgment Day. Not Terminator. Kind of, but not quite. Okay? Judgment Day. When everyone faces the great and final judge. That is, all masks are gone. All that is hidden will be made known. If one accepts traditional Christian theology. Every secret will be made known. Where? Right here. With everybody around. Everybody will see and hear everything each other has done or said or not done or said. All sins of commission and omission revealed. Right? Gotta make, chill bumps go up and down the spine. So, she goes, whoosh, I don't get, what do you mean? Your words are a mystery. Take away the veil for them at least. Notice, your words are veiled, in other words. What's a mystery? Give me an example of a mystery. Anything. Jesus dying and rising again. How's that a mystery? Yeah, explain it. How did it happen? Did somebody secretly come in with a battery and, young Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, Is that what happened? Don't know. Explain it rationally. Logic, can't. How about even before that? God, creator of the universe, becomes a 8-pound, 2-ounce, 19-inch baby. Explain rationally. You can't. Trinity, traditional Christian theology, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. One being, 3 persons. You can't rationally do that. All right? That's a mystery. A whodunit is not a mystery. Why? Because you find out who done it. It's solved. Problem solved. The missed part in mystery means essentially unknown, unsolvable. Okay? So she says, explain them. If she'd taken a basic course in etymology of words, she would understand you can't explain the mystery if it is a mystery. Okay? And he says, I will so far as my vow may suffer me. What vow? I mean, he has made a vow, it's implied at least. What was the vow?
Never take off the veil.
Okay, yes. But before that, what was the vow implied that he made? Will you marry me? Yes, I will. That's kind of a vow. You don't break that. Unless you're a, jerk. Either one of them, okay? So what's the vow? That he's not going to take off the veil. Problem. Who do you make? When you make a vow, you make it to somebody else. God. So he says, no, then, this veil is a type and a symbol. I'm bound to wear it ever, both in light and darkness, in solitude and before the gaze of multitudes. And as with strangers, so with my familiar friends. No mortal eye will see it withdrawn. No mortal eye means no, not even you, dear Elizabeth. This dismal, dark, gloomy shadow, etc., shade, this dismal dismality, this darkness, this gloominess, this shadowy shadowness will separate me from the world. Even you can never come beyond it. You can see the rest of them naked, but not the face. Okay? He says it's a type and a symbol. They're not synonyms. A symbol is something that, well, in the popular understanding, which is the same understanding in Hawthorne's day, is it's something that represents something else. Okay? A type goes back to biblical theology and a school of interpretation that says there are events in people in the Old Testament that are types of things that will come later, not prophecies. That's different. Types mean that it points to a fulfillment later on. For example, Samson. Who knows the basic story of Samson? Anybody? Really strong guy, long hair, all right? Pledged to God by his parents. And then he goes and screws around, literally. Different women, marries a Philistine. Jews aren't really happy with that, etc. Gets captured by the Philistines because his wife, Delilah, cuts his hair off, where his strength resides. He gets captured, taken prisoner, has his eyes put out, and they kind of make him perform almost like a dancing bear, in front of their pagan symbols. And he asked at one of these pagan festivals to stand between the pillars of the temple of Dagon, the Philistine god. And they're like, okay, and he prays, God, let me have my strength back just one more time. And he destroys the temple himself in the process. So what's he a type of? What does he do in doing that? He delivers the Israelites from the bondage of the Philistines. He's a deliverer. He comes after Moses. Moses is a deliverer. He leads the Israelites out of Egypt to the promised land. He is a type of, and Samson is a type of, and Joshua is a type of, and all of the judges in the book of Judges, and most of the kings, well, the good ones at least, and all of the prophets are types of the great deliverer, the great prophet, Christ. Okay? But images can also be types. For example, Moses in one of the battles, if Moses puts his hands down, his arms down, the Israelites start losing. I think it's against the Amalekites. Start losing in their battle. So Joshua and I think Caleb come up to him, his son, come up to him and they raise his arms. And as long as Moses' arms are raised, notice the shape, they win. Cross. Okay? That's a type. So the symbol is something that stands for or represents something else. So he says this is a type and a symbol. It points to and it represents. What's the symbol? What's it represent? Death? Possibly. Notice a symbol isn't just, something that is a symbol doesn't only point to just one referent. Points to many. Death? Possibly. Okay? Secrets? Possibly. Not being able to see well? Possibly. St. Paul says, now we see but through a glass darkly in one of the letters to the Corinthians. But then, meaning after we die, in the resurrection, we will see face to face. That is, we won't need glasses because we'll be right here. And we will know as we are known. We will know. We'll know what? I think could be entirely wrong. I'm not a biblical scholar by any means. We'll know ourselves then as we are known. That is, all those dirty little secrets that we've even forgotten about. Okay? So, she says, but what if everybody is scandalized by this? You're wearing this thing. What if they think you're hiding secret sin or you're mourning for some? And he goes, if I'm wearing it for mourning, who can't wear one? Who doesn't have sorrows in their lives? And if I'm wearing it for secret sin, who can't do that also? What did Jesus say to the people who caught the woman in adultery? Anybody remember?
He who is without sin throw.
Yeah, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And they're like, damn it. You just start dropping the rocks and walking away. Because they're like, if I was in the guy's shoes, I'd have done her too. Drop the rocks. Or any. He doesn't say sexual sin. He who is without sin. What is sin? Comes from the Greek word hamartia. It gets translated into English as sin. What does sin mean? It really means missing the mark. The mark like the target. There's a bullseye. Red. Outside that are circles. Missing the mark means not hitting the bullseye. Not being what one ought to do / be. It's it. Whenever you fail slightly, a 99 out of 100, guess what? Failure. That's kind of what it means. Okay? So, she says, show me your face. One last time, and I'll be happy and I'll live with you, Mary. He says, nope, sayonara. And she leaves. Okay? I mean, really, who wouldn't? Sorry. So, he lives a long old life, keeps preaching. People come from far and wide to hear his sermons. Why? Because he makes them feel better. Because he says, oh, we're all on this journey together, and whatever road you're on, we'll all end up the same place. Jesus just wants us all to be happy. No. He preaches the same kind of stuff that scares the hell out of people. And they want to apparently have the hell scared out of them because they all come. So he's lying on his deathbed, page 338, And the minister of Westbury, another town nearby, calls him Venerable Father Hooper. Two words that most Protestants don't use to describe anybody else, unless they're talking about their own fathers. Why? Because Jesus said, call no man father. Venerable means worthy of veneration. Protestants don't do that, okay? So he says, you're about to die, and you're going to lift the veil, and don't you want to lift the veil before you lift the veil? No. And he tries to reach down and lift up Father Hooper's veil. And Father Hooper is like, never! You know? And then the other minister goes from Venerable Father Hooper to dark old man. Wow, there's a quick, mentality change in a matter of seconds. Why do you tremble at me alone, he says. Sitting up, these are his dying words. Tremble also at each other. Have men, and notice what he says now, last 2 minutes. Have men avoided me? Women shown no pity, and children screamed and fled only for my black veil. Notice what commandment do those all go against? What are the two greatest commandments? Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself and love God. That's it. Okay? What but the mystery which it obscurely typifies has made this piece of crepe so awful? When the friend shows his inmost heart to his friend, the lover to his best beloved, when man does not vainly shrink from the eye of his creator, loathsomely treasuring up the secret of his sin, then. So when those three things happen, then call me a monster. Why? I look around me, and on every face he says, I see a black veil. Now, literally, he looks around and he's looking through a black veil, so what does he see on each person? A black veil. Metaphorically, figuratively, what's he saying? Every person who has turned away and shunned me has done so. Why? Because I remind them of themselves. Because in looking at me, what do they see? They see what he saw when he looked in the glass of wine. In other words, they see something they don't want to see. Myself, as I am. Warts and all. Not, literally. Metaphorically, they see darkness where what? There should be light. Okay? I think. That's my interpretation. I could be wrong. Anyways, okay, so for Wednesday, Faulkner, barn burning, very different story. Some language used might be offensive. Roll with it. Try. Okay? It is literally what it sounds like. It's about burning barns. It's about a pyromaniac, etc. Quiz on D2L due Wednesday night. It's extra credit. All right. Have a good day.